Latinos were and the Russians and everybody else. And so they all worked, but they weren't getting paid for weeks, for months. Then you had the housing market collapse because nobody could pay anything. You had essentially squatters almost in the housing, you know, because they couldn't move. They honestly, some of these people had nowhere to go. They didn't have money to even leave town. They brought in a lot of replacement legal workers from homeless shelters, from drug rehab places, anybody they could get their hands on and try to do the labor. That didn't work. That collapsed a lot of the social service sector of the town. To St. Bridget's, a lot of these churches, and went a Lutheran church and fell in the backs of a lot of them, synagogue helping out these families. Farmers, just, you know, local white farmers now didn't have a market for their chickens, for their feed, or feed the chickens and feed in the plant, and so it collapsed economically, and it's devastated. A lot of the little kind of ethnic markets that were there, if you go back, most of you have been there, if you go back now, large parts of downtown remain closed and empty. They're trying to rebuild economically, but now the city owes, you know, tens upon tens of thousands of dollars because they've got back utility costs. Nobody's been able to pay the city for, you know, utilities because everybody lost jobs and it was a nightmare economically. So they've got a long road ahead of them. And Aaron, you want to talk about human relations?
Well, I think that where there's life, there's hope. And the plant's restarted with the new management. It's still running at a minimal size, like 25% of production. But despite, again, people's political thinking, you know, you need gasoline in an engine. And a small town like Postville, without a few anchor industries, just can't cope, just can't survive. So since there are new owners, and even though it's been a little bit of a bumpy beginning, yeah, there is hope. I think that again, in the, you know, all of the crazy stories that came out and what was going on, people didn't realize how much suffering there was for many different groups and many different communities. I mean, you know, the Jewish community was struggling to hold on to everything. I mean, the synagogue became the school, the synagogue, the mortgages weren't paid anymore because it was in the Rabashkin's hands. The Rabashkins are basically bankrupt. They've been destroyed by the prosecution, but the stuff is still in their names. And so there was never an infrastructure for the Jewish community because it was a company town. So what happens in a company town when they decapitate the head of the town and you get everything broiled in a legal morass? So it's been very challenging. And why would a new owner have to take all that responsibility and burden? And truthfully, it's not his problem. It's not his fault. His job is to make his plant go. Whatever the interests of the prior owners were, that was the prior owner. So then you had all these people these guys who, in the Jewish community again, who didn't work or didn't get paid, and then when the new thing came on, they came out with smaller shifts. Many of them struggled to hold on to their homes, their cars, and to whatever they had, and just the basic pay for the basic essentials. On top of the fact that, you know, the broader postal community was giving heart and soul to try and help all the disenfranchised people and the people that the government dumped in postal and wouldn't allow them to work. I mean, we got some help from we got like 600 and how much was it? 600,000 for the
pass-through money.
The pass-through money that helped with people with deposits from the state, which was the one injection that really, you know, gave some serious help because anybody who wasn't able to pay their bills and could prove it could get some help for a period of time. But aside from that, you know, this was born on the shoulders of a lot of people on the outside donating and helping. A lot of people just didn't make it. Some people fell apart. Some people lost their homes. Some people left. You know, when it says the people left, it's not just the Latinos that left. There are managers who lost their jobs. They're not to go. There were people who depended on sub-industries that had to close. One of the gift shop and the lady in town, Wishingwell, she's been there for years. She's in the negative, losing every single month. There are a lot of stores that closed, so the collateral damage has been pretty extensive. But again, I feel, and I think many of the people in the town that are forward-thinking, because here we are again. We're being handed a new set of cards. So the choice is cry and whine, or pick up the pieces and make something out of Postville again. So I think that sentiment is there. Let's make something out of Postville again. Let's build and let's put it back together. And it's not going to be. It's the B song. You know, it's a different melody, it's a different tune, it's a different time, a different dance. But it's going to, I think, have another positive story as we proceed.
Marv.
I have a comment.
comment is for those of you who want to read a horrifying story about meatpacking plants in another community, IBP plant. IBP has meatpacking plants in those small towns all over Iowa, but Deborah Fink has a book called Cutting Into the Meatpacking Line, and she's an anthropologist who went into a meatpacking plant in Prairie, Iowa, and worked there and interacted with the people there, and it's an illuminating story of what it's like to work in one of those plants. My question, there have been a number of hints that have come up from the audience and from you all about this, and I would like to hear you flesh it out a little bit, and that's about the role of the Christian churches in the community, both before the raid, in the positive part of the story, and dealing with diversity and dealing with that issue, and then also in the healing process after the raid. What's been their role? Is there a difference between the Catholic churches and the Protestant churches, among the Protestant churches? Just can you address that issue?
Right. Yeah, you know, it gets back to this point that Aaron said. What happened after the raid primarily is that there was no organized relief in the town coming from the government. However you wanted to find that, at the local city government, mayor type of levels, to the county government, to the state, to the federal government. One of you mentioned about this, I think you said this is a human disaster. It was equivalent to the type of disaster you see after a massive tornado, hurricane, or flooding. It destroyed people, destroyed homes, economies, and that kind of stuff, and they were very much left on their own. And by and large, the faith institutions really rose to the occasion. They were incredible. Had they not been there, had you not had a lot of those churches, for instance, taking care, like the Catholic Church did a tremendous amount of work with them. It was interesting because there's so many groups that needed help, and so groups started to specialize, and so ultimately a lot of the Catholic Church wound up dealing with primarily the Guatemalans. You had a lot of the synagogue, the Jewish community, they were dealing, because remember, you had lots of displaced, unpaid Jewish American workers that actually were not migrant workers, that had 9, 10, 12 children, mortgages, suddenly lost jobs. Where do you go? How do you pick up with 12 kids and leave? You don't. You can't. You're foreclosing, this kind of thing. You had all these other, you know, variety of homeless people literally coming in and this kind of stuff. So groups started to specialize. They worked more with unique populations. They rose to the occasion. People in local towns like Decatur, Decorah, I mean, a lot of the local Iowan communities really came through, and in large part, a lot of those efforts were driven by faith organizations, and they were very helpful. And I think what happened from a human standpoint, it was interesting. Prior to the raid, again, you have this whole accommodation model. People try to get along, not bother each other, just get through the day, do what you need to do, help each other out when needed, and that worked well. You had people in the town that we term champions of diversity. They were people that just, they get it. They get multiculturalism, they get multi-ethnic populations, they support it, they promote diversity and tolerance. And they were from all races and ethnicities. So you had people like Aaron, you had people like Nina Taylor, and Father Paul at Catholic, all these people that do this kind of thing, they're supportive of these efforts and ideas, and that was great. Then you had the immigration raid, and it was tremendous. It was like it got hit by EF tornado, 5 tornado, wiped out the town. Then you started to see more tension coming out because it's normal. You're blaming people, you're getting angry, you're under-resourced anyway. Now you have this fiasco, this chaos. There's no government aid coming in. It's literally on the backs of people, of Iowans primarily, helping each other out, just like we do when you get flooded in Cedar Rapids or a tornado in New Hartford, same kind of thing. And so that did I think, looking as a semi-outsider in, I think that did increase to some level the tension among people that were these champions of diversity or their groups. And I think lately a lot of that has been worked out more, and I think they're becoming more united again in getting the town through. I do think that all the ethnic groups, all the cultural groups there, no matter who they want to blame or what their take has been on this entire issue, I think they are all pretty much united in feeling that the raid itself was too strong. That if you have issues with illegal, labor and immigration law violations, that kind of thing, that it could have been addressed, but it could have been addressed less aggressively rather than a big sort of martial law type of raid that happened there.
Yeah, obviously the government put millions of dollars and a lot of thought and planning into the raid, but none into the aftermath. It's one thing to do that in a Marshall town, which has 25,000 people. It's another to do it in Postville, which had 2,300 people. And there were folks in town, including some of the churches, who went to the Red Cross and says, "We have a humanitarian disaster here."
Help us.
No, we don't do humanitarian disasters, although there were homeless people. And